And hold on, we are coming live. Just a little click more. And here we go. Now we're live on the three platforms. Welcome to I Living Conversations, the 153rd session. I have Blue Hair and Women with me here, and I'm Julian Katari, and we're continuing with the fourth session of The Secret Life of Water.
And
Has
this
been
will be
going
the
on
last.
for three sessions. It's been very revealing, very technical. So grab a seat and replay as many times as you need to fully understand this information that you won't find easily. And let's not say anything else about it and get it going. Welcome everyone to tonight's conversation.
So tonight we're going to talk about the pulsation of water. So all of life takes place in three spheres: the carbonosphere, the atmosphere, and the stratosphere. These various spheres are interconnected through the agency of water. On the other hand, water's various state of aggregation form the bridges for the formation and transformation of the basic elements it transports, which are transferred from the stratosphere into the interior of the earth and vice versa. So apart from the purely mechanical cycle of physical water, there's another form of circulation which operates in the opposite direction, and that's called the energy cycle. So here we have two contrasting movements involved: the upward movement of carbones with the carrier water and the downward movement of oxygen. At the point where the paths of these mutually opposed currents intersect, energy is freed. Energy is released. So the outcome of this continuous reciprocal, I got a mosquito flying around me, sorry. The outcome of this continuous reciprocal interaction is the metamorphosis of the different forms of water in each individual zone and the constant transformation of the various species of vegetation in which water, ceaselessly moved by the interplay of forces, flows on its onward way. This inner equilibrium of forces is to a certain extent inhibited by the effect of the self-weight of water. Through fluctuations in the magnitude of the component forces, water particles are constantly made to rise and fall. In other words, the pulsation of water inevitably occurs, which is one of the non-transmutable governing laws of life, is this pulsation. You can't have life without pulsation. Every new entity and all growth evolves from the smallest beginnings. So in the natural order of things, every complex form of vegetation is built up from the simpler forms preceding it. The carrier of the necessary elements and the moderator of life processes in the vegetation root zone is groundwater, whose movement is triggered by a drop in temperature. The impulse then for the movement of or pulsation of water is a product of interactions between the opposing elements it contains, the necessary resistance for which it is supplied by the water itself. So interactions and resistance. So as it moves along its path, water dissolves salts at one moment, transports them at another, and deposits them at a third, and creates and transforms energies. The essence and purpose of these eternal metamorphic processes is to build up and maintain various forms of vegetation and physical bodies, which on their part represent the bridges by which energies are created and maintained between heaven and earth. So the two forms of evolution are of material or physical nature and the immaterial or spiritual. All that exists, be it a stone, a plant, an animal, a human being, a planet, or the sun, represents an organism possessing both a body and a soul. And each ray of light and heat requires a physical form in which it can manifest itself and evolve. Every body requires an inner energy which creates and transforms it. And when the body decays, then the energies are freed and they can go on to do something else. The energies that initially created it, right? They're never lost. So when the energies or spirits or soul lose their habitat with the decay of the body, then they willingly coalesce with the water that eternally circulates in and over the earth and transmute it into a new life form. So every material form of vegetation always has its immaterial counterpart in light, heat, and radiation. Every change in sphere changes the overall internal and external conditions. It alters the weight and the inner density of the radiation of the physical substance, water, and so the direction in which the carrier of life moves. Disturbances to the inner and outer conformities with natural law lead to the disturbance of the very foundation of all life's creative processes. The ancient way of the womb, or love religion of the Chinese, forbade any kind of intrusive interference with the earth. This is part of the reason that the Chinese culture has endured longer than that of any other people. It owes its existence to the fact that the carbon sphere remained untouched for a long period of time. As long as humanity refrained from interfering with nature's interdependent organic functions, and as long as Mother Earth could still supply her blood water to the vegetable kingdom in a healthy condition, there was no necessity to contemplate how wholesome water could be produced artificially in the same way that it is naturally constituted inside the earth. So nature alone should be our great teacher. If we wish to regain our spiritual and physical health, we should not simply rely on secondary mechanical or hydraulic phenomenon. As a first priority, we must see to it that sublime conformities with natural law are thoroughly investigated. Conformities which govern the ways in which Mother Earth prepares her life-giving fluid and the means she uses to conduct it to the point of use. In order to permeate the great mystery surrounding the origin of all life, we must take an interest in not only our living space, but in the above and below in which water pursues its eternal cycle, in obedience to a great and immutable law, unchangeable. So if we wish to make life enjoyable and beautiful again, then we must apply the lever where life begins. The origin of life is water, which is the guardian of the secret of all becoming and evolution. This secret will only be unveiled once we come to understand the innermost nature of water. In exactly the same way that a ripe apple falls to the earth from the tree, water rises out of the earth of its own accord when it is mature. It matures when it has so transformed itself internally that it can and must take leave of the dark womb of Mother Earth by overcoming its own physical weight. So where possible, the Romans tapped their springs in such a way that a certain height above the mouth of the spring, they placed a cover in the form of a thick stone slab that was carefully leveled and smoothed on the sloping face of natural rock. Having completely sealed all around the perimeter with driven wedges, a hole was then cut in the stone slab into which the outlet pipe was inserted and secured so that no entry of air was possible. In the same manner that a seed in the moist earth requires heat and cold, light and shade, and the energies associated with them, exactly the same applies to water. Water has an equal need of those opposites in order to build itself up and reconstitute itself internally. So the very reason water flows through the universe is to maintain and gather these opposites. And in every drop of water dwells a world of possibilities. Even the divine has its abode in every drop of water. So if we destroy water, if we remove it from its cradle of the forest, then we stupidly rob ourselves of our most prized possession, our health. If our work is to become a blessing instead of a curse, then we must content ourselves with living off the interest and superabundant ripened products of Earth's capital. We must never live off the substance of Earth directly. Water supplies the interest in such a valuable form that we could do without all the rest and live off her surplus alone, taking only what is ripe once we understand how the earth manages her household. Good high-grade spring water differs from the atmospheric water, which is rainwater, in its inner material components. Apart from dissolved salts, high-grade spring water possesses a relatively high quota of gases in free and bound form. Up to 96% of the gases absorbed by good high-quality spring water consist of compounds of carbon. And this is where we're getting to the definition. Carbon, not
Yeah.
carbon. Carbon is to be understood as all the carbons of the chemist, all elements and their compounds, all metals and minerals. So in a word, all substance except oxygen and hydrogen. So that's what the carbonosphere is.
Oh, wow. Okay, like
Everything except oxygen and hydrogen.
everything that can be carried by water.
Yeah.
Okay.
So atmospheric water, rainwater, condensate, or surface water exposed to strong aeration and intense light influences exhibit a comparatively high oxygen content, almost salt, no salt, little or no free carbon dioxide, and bound carbonic acid, and an absorbed atmospheric gas content predominantly of oxygen in physically dissolved form. Water is ripe when its absorbed air contains at least 96% carbon spherics, together with a quota of solid carbones associated with such a sphere. It is precisely upon this inner ripeness that water's excellence and uprising or levitative force depends. The longer the path traveled, the more highly organized and qualitatively higher grade its inner energy becomes, provided that the appropriate transformative substances are present. And Victor Schauberger said, I regard water as the blood of the earth. Its internal process, while not identical to that of our blood, is nonetheless very similar. It's this process that gives water its movement. I would compare this inner motion, the origin of all possible physical movement, to that of a blossoming flower bud. As it unfolds, it creates a vortex-like crown of petals, in the center and at the end of which stands the true secret of motion, life in statu nascendi, meaning in the form of a concentration of movement. In water, the meanders continually bring about processes of concentration and unfolding. And that's opening and closing. That's what life is all about, opening and closing, concentrating and unfolding. Right? And in a sense, they represent water blossoms out of which growing radiation-emitting calyces or funnels develop in an upstream direction. So these vortexes or calyces, in their direct effect, they are the cause of the breaking of older de-energized river water. The faster water drains down steep gradients where it receives various impact-related impulses arising from encounters with resistance such as stones, the more powerful the reactive forces of recoil will become. These, through the eruption or expansion of the unfolding water calyces in an upstream direction, break the apparently unrestrained flow on steep inclines as a result of these inner processes of growth. So while the water is pouring down at a great rate, it's created these calyces that are moving, these vortices that are moving upstream, and that breaks the water, although to our eyes it doesn't seem like it's being break, but it is. The secret of the outgrowth of new water, which takes place in the opposite direction to the flow, is concealed in the cycloid space curve motion through which the water is made to pulsate. The influence of water temperature has been dismissed as too insignificant for the purposes of stream management and therefore for flood mitigation, timber flotation and rafting operations, water supply, and dam construction in general, and also for the whole realm of hydroelectric energy or technology. So it must be emphasized that the internal variations in water temperature are a result of the differences between the temperature of the water and the medium surrounding it. If internal variations in water temperature are ignored, then the significance of differences between water and air or external temperature and therefore the cause of the water cycle will be negated. No word can truly express the vital role of the water cycle for all life on Earth. Of equal importance are the effect of variations in temperature within the water itself. The understanding alone of the important effect of these variations compels the reappraisal and revision of the fundamental basis of currently held theories relating to the sphere of river engineering. Another omission in the contemporary theory is about the formation of many springs. In the nature of things, as rainwater infiltrates the Earth's surface, it acquires the temperature of the strata through which it passes. Eventually, it reaches a level with a temperature of 4 degrees Celsius or 39.2 Fahrenheit. That's just above frosty. Just right above frost.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that water cannot be compressed at 4 degrees Celsius plays a role in spring formation. It must either yield to the pressure and make its way to the surface, or its temperature must adapt to the pressure. So enormous quantities of water then are raised to immense heights hourly through evaporation, and equally large volumes of subterranean water are forced upwards to be expressed as springs. To return to the theme, the effect of internal variations in water temperature on the movement of water, it's important to know that even in apparently motionless water, very considerable movements occur. If an ostensibly still stretch of water is exposed to the sun on one side only, then an inclined plane or thermocline is formed through the warming of the water surface in an isolated area, which induces a flow towards the colder side and results in the formation of circulating currents. When water comprising strata of different temperatures and therefore different densities flows down a riverbed gradient, these layers travel alongside and above each other for a long time without mixing. The movement of every particle of water down a given gradient is linked to a very particular velocity, which corresponds to a specific weight. The greater velocity of forward motion, the greater or more intense the formation of vortices. Turbulence is the interruption of the forward motion of flowing water. Through knowledge of the spring and the way it comes into being, and with a clear understanding of the function of turbulence, every possible way to make use of water practically in accordance with natural law, and therefore without limitation, is made available to humanity. Everything flows, and all processes in the atmosphere are reflected in the interior of the Earth. So to summarize, number one, the body of water passing through a channel profile is never a homogeneous mess. It's always exhibits strata of different temperatures. Number two, in all channels, the relation between flow velocity and the bed gradient is primarily dependent on the thermal stratification of the water. Number three, the channel profile affects the flow velocity to the extent that its form and composition exert an influence on the differences in the temperature of the individual water strata. And number four, the profile is the product of the processes that take place within the flowing body of water itself. The increasing frequency of catastrophic floods and the constantly increasing aridity in many areas raises the questions as to whether, in conjunction with other measures inaugurated by a human hand, arbitrary systems of water resources are not to blame for these problems. So two factors need to be examined: contemporary methods of river regulation and the increase in forest clearance. A very important factor that is ignored in all hydrological engineering practices is the temperature of water in relation to soil and air temperature, as well as to the internal variations in temperature in flowing or standing water. The movement and distribution of water returning to the ground surface from the atmosphere is conditioned by the prevailing rainwater temperature and by the temperature of the surrounding air and ground strata. If the temperature of the incident water is higher than the ground strata supposed to absorb it, then through cooling and becoming specifically heavier as a result, rainwater will readily be able to infiltrate to the interior of the Earth. After having attained a temperature of 4 Celsius, its condition of greatest density, and by sinking further, the water eventually arrives at a strata of higher temperature, and by accommodating itself to these temperatures, it becomes specifically lighter. So under these particular conditions of pressure, a water stratum with a temperature of 4 Celsius is formed within the general body of groundwater, And this represents the full cycle of water, the full hydrological cycle. So to summarize, the full hydrological cycle is infiltration of water into the earth, passage through the 4 degrees Celsius center stratum of the groundwater, purification at this temperature, further sinking into subterranean aquifers due to its own weight, then transition to a vaporous state due to the strong geothermal influences, and rising again towards the ground surface with a simultaneous uptake of nutrients, cooling of the water and deposition of the nutrients, draining away over the ground surface, evaporating and forming clouds, and then falling again as rain. So in warm soils, the 4 degrees Celsius groundwater stratum is missing, and so the counterweight to the upward pressure from below is absent. If the temperature of rainwater is lower than the uppermost ground stratum, then the water initially sinks to a certain depth and there becomes warmed and lighter. Finally, it's forced to the surface again, and provided it doesn't evaporate immediately, drains away along the riverbed gradient, and the full cycle no longer develops. It's only a half a cycle. So the half cycle is precipitation of water earthward, surface runoff, evaporation, cloud formation, and reprecipitation as rain. The height of the groundwater table fluctuates according to the temperature of the ground strata, which are also affected by the temperature of the infiltrating water masses. And air temperature also plays a major role. So where localized impoundment of water masses occurs, cold bottom water influences the temperature of the surrounding ground strata. These are cooled, and in this way, a stable positive temperature gradient is created, since rainwater will always be warmer than colder ground. As a result, the groundwater table will be raised, and the absorption capacity of the soil will be increased both laterally and vertically. The 4 degrees Celsius center stratum in the groundwater will be displaced downwards, leading to the formation of a natural subterranean reservoir, which inhibits rapid surface drainage and gives rise to the full hydrological cycle. And I would guarantee that we do not have a natural subterranean reservoir here in Oklahoma, because the surface runoff is incredible. So in contrast, high surface temperatures permit hardly any water to infiltrate into the ground at all. And why do we have high surface temperatures? Because we have no trees. The accumulation of groundwater ceases, or it only accumulates in small quantities at great depths. Through evaporation of small residues of groundwater still present, the ground becomes increasingly incapable of absorption. Due to the effect of too high a ground temperature, percolating water will develop into surface runoff, leading to rapid evaporation and only half of the hydrological cycle. In such districts, hot springs frequently make their appearance, forced up to the surface through fissures by upward pressure from below, for which no counter pressure exists due to the lack of groundwater. The absorptive capacity of the ground is dependent on the conditions of temperature, which give rise to the regulation of the groundwater table. Water is able to discharge over the ground surface under two conditions. With the negative temperature gradient, which means high surface temperatures, runoff occurs immediately. With a positive temperature gradient, which would be low surface temperatures, it takes place only after saturation has occurred, and the groundwater table rises toward the surface under the influence of the sun's heat. So in the first case, the preconditions for the creation of floods are far greater, and all the more so if, as a result of direct runoff of water, a positive temperature gradient is developed by friction, when the water tends to infiltrate the ground gradually, loosening and carrying away boulders and pebbles. A thermal surface gradient is now added, and a further increase in runoff velocity and the power to shift pebbles, gravel, and sediment ensues. So in the second case, if saturation of the groundwater basin occurs as a result of a positive temperature gradient, then the groundwater or spring water that now surfaces is colder than the ground strata below it. And the temperature gradient is reversed and rapid drainage of heavy water masses follows and the rupture of riverbanks. In order to avert the temperature of flooding, both extremes must be eliminated. By building dams that incorporate appropriate provisions, thermal conditions and the rate of discharge can once again be regulated. The discharge conditions of these regulating dams can be automatically adjusted thermally and quantitatively to the prevailing daytime temperature. In this way, both extremes can be avoided, and then there's no danger of flooding, because by adjusting the temperature of the discharge to the mean annual temperature, the correct ground temperature gradient can be established. This results in the restoration of the absorptive capacity of the ground. And after having read this and written this out, I realized that our ground here, that's the problem. Our ground here, our soil here in Oklahoma has no absorptive capacity.
Yeah,
because of all the clear cutting.
It's so tragic. And yet I would think there are some trees next to your house.
Well, there is, but like even right now in the woods, it's still really dry. The trees are all losing their leaves. And they're turning colors, even though there hasn't been any frost, because it's been dry for 6 weeks.
Mm. Oh wow!
But we got a crap ton of rain in July. Crap ton of rain. It shouldn't have happened, and people say, well, it's sandy loam soil here, it just runs away. No, it's because we've screwed it. Because there's so much area of land that's clear cut, it affects the temperature even into the forest.
Oh wow, that's tragic.
So all of our current dams all produce only half hydrological cycles. And it cannot and should not be the task of the river engineer to correct nature. The natural regulators of the drainage of water are forests and lakes. By cooling the ground in their immediate vicinity, forests create a permanent positive temperature gradient, resulting in the formation of groundwater reservoirs, which have a delaying effect on rainwater discharge. Where forests have been cut and lakes are absent, an artificial impoundment of water must be created, which are ponds, but they must be correctly built and properly operated. Only then can they bring about the specified function of groundwater recharge, detention of runoff, and the creation of a proper temperature gradient. However, most of our ponds are not correctly created, and they become nothing more than stores of water. They collect the water and fulfill the function of rainwater detention, but they almost always produce only half a cycle, and that's true. Absolutely true. There's not a pond here in Oklahoma that's not been built to be only a store of water. That's another big part. That's why even though my property is surrounded on the north by forest, because of the lack of lakes, that the combination of the lake and the forest. That would be the reason. So through the management of waterways, a reduction in soil productivity is produced, and this manifests itself in the retreat of groundwater or its other extreme, swamp development. And that's where we're going to stop with water.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, what's the next element that's coming up? Or what's
well, we'll see. I'm not sure.
So you're not sure where the owl investigations are taking us next?
Well, I want to do, we've already done the 5 elements, how we were spun into space and into material form and how to get to know them. But we need to get to know our clan mothers, which are our landscapes, which would be the Bagua, which includes landscapes. I'm not sure I'm ready to do that yet.
Okay.
So we might go to We might talk about science and experience next week.
Okay. Science and experience. Okay.
Or we might talk about language. Let's
Okay.
talk about language. Let's do that. Let's talk about language.
Language. Okay. Just language. Just okay. So of course this is in the context of the teachings of OWL Sustainable Life Dojos.
Yeah.
And,
It'll be the flesh of language.
the flesh of language. Okay, I like that. And so we've covered this very extensive teaching about water, and it reveals so many things about our own nature, about the nature of biology. I mean, this has got me thinking, and I'm pretty sure that anybody that listened to this will be doing so, like I did, where I've just been thinking how much of our biological nature comes from just the essential nature of water. Like,
vast majority.
This has got me really, really meditating all the time and thinking. And the other day, you know what I did? I looked at, I mean, because I've been so deep into this teaching about water with this 4 sessions we've been doing and the books that I've been editing. And I once grabbed a cup of water and I was looking at it. And then, of course, I had seen a message somewhere in the social media that water is actually less. There are a lot more abundant minerals like diamonds in the universe than like things like water. I guess that meme was specifically that diamonds is more abundant than wood in the universe. But then I thought, well, but then the most valuable thing there is water. It's like we see it sometimes as such something we're so used to that we think it's so abundant, but it's so precious. I was looking at a cup of water and just thinking, this is like liquid diamond. This is just the most.
It is.
And the importance of looking at that way. I mean, that changed. That took me to a next level of respect to water.
Well, that's the work Masato Emoto did, right? And that others are carrying on with. That by treating water nicely, it creates beautiful diamonds, beautiful crystals, which are diamonds. If you play heavy metal music to water, it can't form diamonds.
Yeah.
If you speak hatred to water, it can't form diamonds.
So it has been a very, very incredible learning journey, and I want to invite people to join that same journey, and of course this is not something that you can easily just buy. You have to be part of it, because that's what this is about. It's and then of course you might not imagine this, but you are to become if you join, you become the investigator, you become the leading edge of discovery. That's the whole point. That's what we have to understand, that we have the power to take knowledge and science beyond what institutions have taken it, where they've all been driven by the limits of monetized thinking, and that of course limits understanding. It leads to a lot more corruption, to a lot more other priorities being put, instead of the search for truth, the search for knowledge, the search for real understanding, of proven understanding. So this is where we can develop our real proven understanding. This is the place to do so. And so we invite you to this biggest project ever that is being taken forth here. And as you can see, it's not something that any institution is backing, that any government is behind. This is the real freedom, the real sovereignty that you can be part of.
Right.
And we're gonna be seeing each other next week with the flesh of language, or flesh and language.
Yeah.
The flesh of language. Alrighty, so very beautiful. Thank you very much, and send you lots of love, everyone. And with that, we will end the live stream.
Right.
Alrighty, so see you soon.